On the morning of my 18th birthday, I lost my home, my savings, and whatever was left of my family. On the morning of my 18th birthday, I woke up to cold water hitting my face. Not a joke splash. A solid stream from a plastic pitcher, straight over my eyes, my nose, my mouth. I shot up, coughing. My mother stood over me, lips pressed into a thin line, the empty pitcher dangling from her hand. Behind her, my stepfather, Travis, leaned against the doorway with my duffel bag at his feet and a cardboard box stuffed with my things. "Happy birthday," Mom said. "Time to grow up and get out." For a second I honestly thought I was dreaming. "What are you talking about?" I rasped. "I'm your son. You've been a burden since your father died," she replied calmly. "Therapy bills, your nightmares, the constant drama. We did our job. We kept you fed and housed. Now you're legally an adult. Our responsibility is over." Travis nodded like she just read from a handbook. 18 years of food and a roof, he said. "Most people don't get that much. Be grateful." I looked from one to the other, waiting for a crack in their faces, a sign this was some twisted joke pushed too far. There was nothing. Just a closed suitcase by the bed, the empty spaces where my posters had been, my desk drawer already cleaned out. They had planned this. Packed my life while I was asleep. I didn't cry. I went quiet in that way where everything inside you steps back because it hurts too much to be fully present. "Get dressed," Mom said. "You're not staying here another day." 5 minutes later I was on the front porch, holding a duffel and a box, staring at the door as the deadbolt slid into place on the other side. No hug. No money. No plan. Just 18 and officially disposable. I walked. I walked until my legs ached and my thoughts blurred. When it became too much, I sat on a low wall outside a pharmacy and prayed in short, clumsy sentences. Not for miracles. Just for someone, somewhere, to see that I existed. I ended up downtown, in front of a building with a faded sign that said Harbor Street Shelter. The lobby smelled like disinfectant and tired coffee. A woman with gray streaks in her hair and a name badge that read Porter, intake counselor, slid a clipboard toward me. "Fill this out," she said gently. "We'll see what we can do." My hand trembled as I wrote my name, Landon Gray. Date of birth. Emergency contact, none. Under family, I wrote my mother's name, Renee Gray, then scratched it out and left the line blank. I had just printed Father, Staff Sergeant Dean Gray, Kia, Afghanistan, when my phone buzzed. They had unblocked me just long enough to add one more cut. From Mom. "Stop calling family saying you're homeless. You're embarrassing us." From Travis. "At least your dad had the decency to die in Afghanistan." I broke in that hard, uncontrollable way where the tears don't ask permission. Right there in the plastic chair, surrounded by strangers, I folded in on myself and sobbed. Ms. Porter came around the desk and put a hand on my shoulder. "Honey, what happened?" I gave her the phone. She read the texts, her jaw tightening. Then she glanced down at the form on her desk. Her eyes froze on my father's name. Her whole posture changed. "Landon," she said slowly, "you wrote that your father died in Afghanistan." "Staff Sergeant Dean Gray." "He did," I said. "I was 6. There was a funeral. A flag. Everything." She gripped the edge of the desk. "Did you ever see his body? Go to a gravesite? Talk to anyone from the military afterward?" I blinked. "We had a memorial. I remember a casket. We moved soon after. Mom said it was too painful to visit his grave. Why does this matter?" She pulled a Chromebook closer and started typing, her fingers moving faster than her expression. For half a minute there was only the sound of keys and my own heartbeat. Then she stopped. The color drained from her face. "Landon," she said quietly, "your father is not listed as deceased." My chest went tight. "What?" "He's alive," she said. "He's at Ridgeview VA Medical Center. A locked psychiatric ward. He's been there for 12 years. The words didn't make sense at first. It felt like someone had turned the world sideways. "That's impossible," I whispered. "We had a funeral. I spent years in grief counseling. My mom told everyone he died a hero." Her eyes were steady and kind, but unshakable. "The system says he survived. He was medevaced home and admitted to Ridgeview. Someone has been his listed contact all this time." I stared at her. My mind tried to grab onto anything that would make this less horrifying. Memories started surfacing. Mom changing the channel when military families came on TV. Her throwing away Dad's old uniforms before we moved, calling them too painful. No grave. No visits. No folded flag in a display case. Just a child's memory of a closed box at the front of a rented chapel. You need to see him, Miss Porter said. Today. Before your mother realizes you know he's alive. Why today? I asked. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Because if they have been taking his benefits as if he were dead, she said, the moment they realize you know he's alive, they will understand that someone can challenge what they've been doing. They will move to protect themselves and their money. You need to move first. She closed the Chromebook, grabbed her keys, and nodded toward the door. Come on. I'll drive. The VA hospital was all hard floors and bright lights and machine hum. We checked in at a desk, then a nurse led us down a long hallway. My heart hammered so loud I could hear it in my ears. At the end of the corridor, in a common room with muted television light flickering on the walls, a man sat in a chair by the window. His hands shook slightly in his lap. Dean, the nurse called softly. You have a visitor. He turned. I saw my own eyes in his face. Older, lined, heavy with things I couldn't imagine, but undeniably the same. Dad? The word scraped its way out of my throat. His whole face collapsed into tears. He pushed himself up on unsteady legs. Landon? His voice cracked. They told me you never wanted to see me. That you knew where I was and chose to stay with them. I thought you were dead, I said. I went to your funeral. Mom said you died overseas. I grieved you. We stood there, both half-rooted to the floor, time collapsing between a 6-year-old at a fake funeral and an 18-year-old in a hospital ward. They said you were better off, he whispered. That I would only drag you down. They told me you didn't ask about me. I did, I said. She shut it down every time. My phone buzzed again. Another notification slid across the screen. My stomach dropped. Alert, savings account ending, 4173 closed. Final balance transferred. The college fund they had always said was, for later. The one I'd never been allowed to touch. The same day I found out my father was alive. The phone slipped from my fingers. Dad bent, picked it up, and read the alert. All my combat pay, he said quietly. I signed it over for you. Years of it. They told me it was being saved for your future. For school. For a home. I thought I was doing the right thing. I couldn't speak. A doctor entered, checked Dad's chart, then looked at me. Your father has been medically ready for discharge for some time, she said. But with his disabilities, he needed family willing to take responsibility. None ever came forward. I'll do it, I said, without hesitation. I'll take him. Dad looked at me like he was afraid to believe it. Ms. Porter placed a stack of forms on a table. We can do the discharge paperwork, she said. But you'll need somewhere to go tonight. Not your mother's house. I thought of the front door closing in my face that morning. The texts telling me I was embarrassing them. The 12 years of stolen money and stolen grief. Good, I said. Because we're not going back there as beggars. We're not going back there at all, Dad said quietly. I met his eyes. We are, I said. Just not the way they expect. Dad was discharged the next morning. They gave him jeans and a button-up that didn't fit quite right, a plastic bag with his medications, and a folder of papers he kept rearranging like he was afraid they would vanish. When we stepped out of Ridgeview into the pale daylight, he squinted like the sky was too big. Where are we going? He asked. I could have said, I don't know. It would have been honest. But I heard my mother's voice in my head, telling me I couldn't handle anything without her. To see them, I replied. Not to ask. To show them we know. The closer we drove to my old neighborhood, the shallower Dad's breathing became. By the time we turned onto our street, his hands were clenched on his knees. They said you were better off with them, he murmured. They said I was dangerous. That if I loved you, I'd stay away. I pulled up in front of the house. The same lawn. The same cracked front step. The same door I'd stood outside of yesterday, holding a duffel bag and my whole life in 2 hands. Today, I said quietly, we stop letting them write the story. We walked up together. I knocked once. Footsteps approached. The deadbolt slid back. The door opened. Travis stared at Dad as if the world had skipped a track. The color drained from his face. For a second he didn't look like a man who enjoyed control, he looked like someone who had just seen the past step onto his porch. Behind him, Mom appeared with a fresh cup of coffee. When she saw Dad, her grip loosened. The mug slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor, coffee splashing across the tile. My father stood there, thinner and shaking, but unmistakably alive. "Hello, Travis," he said. His voice was quiet, but steady. "We need to talk about the years of benefits you collected after Ike died." Travis's expression flickered through shock, calculation, then anger. "You can't just show up here making wild accusations," he snapped. "You're trespassing." Mom's face changed faster than his. The panic smoothed into concern so practiced I knew she'd used it before. "Dean," she said softly, stepping forward, "are you off your medication? You've been sick a long time. You get confused about what's real. We had a funeral. We mourned you. You must remember that." Her tone was honey over stone. Dad's hands shook harder. "I remember being strapped to a bed," he said. "I remember asking why my son never came. You told the staff I didn't want visitors. You told me he never asked." Renee glanced at me then, something sharp in her eyes, already searching for angles. "Landon," she said, "tell him. You were there at the memorial. You know how hard this has been for us." I felt my hand move toward my pocket as if it had decided before I did. I slid out my phone, opened the recorder, and held it down at my side. "I know you told me he died," I said. "I know you put me in grief counseling every week for years. I know the bank closed my savings account the same morning I found out he's alive." For the first time, a crack appeared in her performance. Travis's gaze dropped to the phone. His pupils narrowed. He stepped forward, hand outstretched. "Turn that off," he barked. "You can't record us without." Dad stepped between us. He was shaking, but he stayed in front of me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a neighbor across the street, pretending to check their mail while staring openly. Travis stopped. Mom switched tactics again. "Let's not do this on the porch," she said. "Come inside. We'll talk like adults. Landon, sweetheart, you've always been sensitive. This is a lot for you. Let's calm down." Dad's breath was coming fast now. I recognized the look from Ridgeview when something triggered him: air too thin, room too small, past too close. We had come here for one thing, to show them the ghost they built was standing in front of them, breathing. That was done. I touched Dad's arm. "We're leaving," I said. He nodded, eyes still on the doorway. "This isn't over," he told them. "For the first time in 12 years, it isn't just you telling the story." We turned and walked back down the path. I could feel their eyes on our backs, the weight of years pressing between our shoulder blades. In the car, Dad stared at his hands. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he whispered. "Signing everything over, trusting them to take care of you. I thought I was keeping you safe." "You tried," I said. "They used that. That's on them." My voice was steady. Inside, I felt like glass. I called Ms. Porter from the parking lot of a grocery store nearby and told her what happened. She didn't waste words. "I can get you a motel voucher for tonight," she said. "It's not much, but it's a door that locks and 2 beds. Go to the Sunrise Lodge on Maple. Ask for the manager. I'll call ahead." The Sunrise Lodge didn't match its name. The only view was a highway and a cracked parking lot. But the manager already had our voucher ready. Room 109. 2 narrow beds, a desk, a small fridge, a television bolted to the wall. The air smelled faintly of old smoke and cleaning fluid. I put Dad's discharge papers on the desk. Then my birth certificate. Then my phone with the screenshots of the texts. Then a notepad from the motel with the bank alert copied onto it. It looked small for 12 years of betrayal. But it was something I could see and touch. I took photos of each document. Then I called the bank. After 15 minutes of hold music, a woman answered, introduced herself as from the fraud department, and asked how she could help. "My college savings account was just closed," I said. "Everything moved out without my permission. That savings was funded by my father's combat pay. He was declared dead. Today I found him alive in a VA psychiatric ward. The same day my account was emptied." She was quiet for a moment. "I'm very sorry you're going through this," she said. "I'm opening a fraud case. I need to confirm some information." We went through basic details. She pulled up the account and confirmed, yes, the balance had been transferred in full yesterday to another account. One I wasn't listed on. "You'll need to file a police report," she said. "We also need any documents showing this money was intended for you. Once you have the report number, call us back. I'll attach it to your case." She gave me a reference code. I wrote it on the motel notepad. My handwriting shook. When I hung up, Dad was sitting on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees. When I deployed, he said, they had me fill out forms. Allotment to family. I told them to send part of my pay straight home to you and your mother. They said it would help build a cushion for your future. I didn't understand the details. I just signed where they told me. Every month, they said it went to a fund in your name. I never saw any of it, I answered. Whenever I asked about college, Mom said, we'll see. Money is tight. He covered his face with his hands. His shoulders shook. I had seen him cry when he recognized me. This was different, deep, quiet grief for a decision he thought was love. You tried to do right by us, I said. They're the ones who twisted it. Not you. There was no sentence that could undo 12 years of damage. But I had to say something. After he fell asleep, I backed up everything. I made a folder on my phone labeled evidence. I uploaded the screenshots of texts, the audio recording from the porch, photos of the papers. I emailed the folder to myself. I saved it to cloud storage. I sent a copy to an empty inbox I just created. I didn't have much. But what I had, they weren't going to erase. The next morning, we went back to Ridgeview's administrative office. Dad needed an official printout of his benefits and some form of ID that wasn't 12 years old. The discharge coordinator, Ms. Hartley, adjusted her reading glasses and keyed in his information. You've been listed as having a representative payee, she said. Someone appointed to manage your benefits for you due to your mental health status. We think that someone has been stealing from him, I said. From us. She pursed her lips. I can request the payment history, she said. You'll need to call this number this afternoon for approval to pick it up. She scribbled a VA hotline on a sticky note and slid it to me. For the ID, she processed a state card request using the P.O. box Ms. Porter had helped us set up through the VA, then told us it would arrive in 2 weeks. 2 weeks felt like a mountain. But it was better than never. Back at the motel, I called the VA number. The automated system bounced me through 3 different menus before a human voice answered. She asked security questions, then said, yes, Mr. Gray has had a representative payee for many years. They handle his funds on his behalf. Who is it? I asked. I can't disclose that over the phone without additional authorization, she replied. But if there are concerns about misuse, we can initiate a review. That process includes a fresh evaluation and may result in a change of payee. How do we start? I asked. She outlined a tangle of forms and appointments. I wrote down acronyms I barely understood, my pen digging into the motel notepad. When I hung up, I called Ms. Porter again. I told her about the representative payee, the bank case, the fake death. This is bigger than just a bad parent, she said. This is potential exploitation of a disabled veteran and a minor. You need legal support and a formal investigation. She gave me 2 names. Adult Protective Services, and a specific investigator, Lewis Mercer. Eastside Legal Aid, and an attorney, Naomi Ellison. Lewis handles abuse and financial exploitation cases, she said. Naomi knows how to drag sunlight into places people want kept dark. I dialed APS first. The intake worker transferred me to Lewis. His voice was calm, slow, careful. He asked for the timeline. I told him, the death, the move, the funeral with no grave, the years of therapy, the discovery at Ridgeview, the closed account, the confrontation on the porch. Based on what you're describing, he said, we're opening a case for suspected financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. That means your father. We'll also note your situation. This will take time, records, interviews, verification, but it isn't nothing, Landon. I want you to hear that. Then we went to legal aid. The waiting room had mismatched chairs and a table stacked with pamphlets. A receptionist checked us in and led us to a small office where a woman in a navy blazer, hair tied back, sat behind a desk with a legal pad. I'm Naomi, she said, standing to shake our hands. Tell me everything. Start where it makes sense to you. I told it again, the water on my face, the shelter, Ridgeview, the stolen money, the porch confrontation. Dad added details I didn't know, the forms he'd signed, the promises he'd been given, the long years of silence. Naomi wrote in tight, neat handwriting. When we finished, she tore off the top sheet and set her pen down. Okay, she said. Here is what I see. There are potential civil claims for fraud and conversion, lying to secure benefits and taking assets that were meant for someone else. There may be criminal exposure as well, especially if they forged documents or misrepresented your father's status to agencies. We can't fix 12 years today. But we can start building a record. She asked what proof we had. I slid my phone across the desk. She scrolled through the screenshots and listened briefly to the porch recording. You did well to document, she said. Keep every message. Don't respond to them directly. Any contact from now on should go through counsel when possible. She typed a letter on her computer, printed it, and had me sign it. It was addressed to Silver Oaks Memorial Chapel, the place where my father's funeral had been held when I was 6. We need to know what actually happened there, she said. Did they receive remains? Was there a burial? Or was it just a room rental? She also told me to file a police report. Financial institutions move faster when there's an active case, she said. If nothing else, it puts a clock on your parents. They'll know someone is watching. That afternoon, at a police station that smelled like dust and coffee, I sat across from Detective Hines while he typed my statement. He didn't look surprised. That was almost worse. When he finished, he printed the report and slid it across the desk. Read this carefully, he said. Make sure it reflects what you've told me. I scanned it. Fake death. VA hospital. Closed account. Potential benefit theft. He gave me a card with the report number. Cases like this are complex, he said. Especially when federal benefits are involved. It will not be fast. But this gives you a foundation with the bank and APS. Back at the motel, an envelope from Silver Oaks was waiting behind the front desk. In the room, I opened it with Dad watching from the bed. They confirmed they had provided a memorial service on the date my mother always called his funeral. 2 hours of chapel use. Chairs. Simple decorations. A guest book. No cremation. No burial. No remains. The casket I remembered sobbing over? An empty box. I felt something cold and dense settle in my chest. The grief I'd carried for 12 years had been real. The coffin had not. I put the funeral home letter on the desk with the other documents. One more piece of proof. One more brick in the wall going up between what my parents said and what was true. For the first time, it didn't feel like I was just reacting to what they did. We were starting to move toward them, with evidence, with witnesses, with the slow, heavy machinery of systems they thought only they knew how to use. I was still 18, still technically homeless, still scared. But I was no longer alone. The days that followed felt like living in 2 timelines at once. One was the familiar one, the kid who woke up to cold water and a locked door. The other was new and unsteady, the son of a living father, standing at the edge of a fight he didn't know how to wage. The motel room became our base. 2 narrow beds. 1 desk. A small fridge humming in the corner. It wasn't home, but it was ours, and the lock on the door turned from the inside. In the mornings, I set out Dad's medications on the chipped bedside table and read the labels twice to make sure I didn't make a mistake. In the afternoons, I made calls. Adult Protective Services. The bank. The VA, legal aid. Every conversation added a new piece to a puzzle that had been hidden from me for 12 years. Lewis from APS called back first. I've opened your father's case formally, he said. His status as a disabled veteran makes this a priority. I'll be interviewing your mother and stepfather, reviewing financial records, and coordinating with the VA and law enforcement. I know it feels slow from your side, but this is movement. Do they know yet? I asked. About the investigation? They will, he said. We'll notify them. They're entitled to respond. That doesn't change what we've already documented. Naomi followed up with an email listing what she needed from me. Any bank statements I could access. Contact information for relatives I remembered. Details of my therapy history. Any memory of life insurance or benefit forms tied to my father's service. I spent that evening scrolling through my phone, digging through old emails, and trying to remember names and addresses from when I was 6. Most of the numbers I tried for extended family were disconnected. One call finally connected, my mother's sister, Aunt Lisa. Her voice was sharp from the first hello. The moment I said my name, she cut in. Your mother already told me what you're doing, she said. Calling around with wild stories. She's heartbroken. You should be ashamed. Aunt Lisa, Dad is alive, I said. He's at Ridgeview. We have discharge papers. There was never a burial. I will not listen to this, she snapped. Your mother lost her husband and raised you alone. If she made mistakes, it was because of grief. Stop attacking her. Do not call this number again. The line went dead. I stared at the motel curtains for a long time after that. It was one thing to suspect my mother had been controlling the story. It was another to feel her voice come out of someone else's mouth. That night, I started writing. On my phone, I opened a document and titled it Timeline. At the top. Age 6, told Dad died in Afghanistan. Under that, I wrote every clear memory I had. Memorial at Silver Oaks. Closed casket. No graveside visit. Moved to a new state within months. New school. New last name on the mailbox when Travis moved in. Mom throwing away Dad's uniforms and pictures. Too painful to keep reminders. Her changing the channel whenever military stories came on. The therapist I saw every week for years. The diagnosis, grief. The way, whenever I cried at night, she said, "Do you know how hard this is for me? You're not the only one who lost someone." Line after line, the pattern became clearer. It wasn't a single lie. It was a system. Naomi called the next day. Silver Oaks responded, she said. They confirm exactly what we suspected. Memorial only. No remains. No burial. Hearing it out loud was different than reading it on a page. It turned my childhood memory of that day into something fragile and strange. The sobs had been real. The casket had been a prop. Can we use that? I asked. We will, she said. It proves a false narrative was created and maintained. That matters. She also told me to go ahead and file a police report, if I hadn't already. I gave her Detective Heinz's report number. She added it to her notes. The VA was the next piece. A social worker named Dario called one afternoon while Dad was napping. His voice was warm but practical. I've read the notes from Ridgeview and the benefits department, he said. Your father was designated as needing someone to manage his funds. Someone stepped into that role. It looks like that person may have abused that trust. We can review the representative payee status and consider changing it to you, but there's a process. What does that mean for him now? I asked. It means we'll interview him, verify his wishes, and assess your ability to manage his benefits, Dario said. It won't fix the past, but it can stop more harm going forward. There's also the HUD VSH program. It helps homeless veterans get stable housing. Your father qualifies. As his caregiver, you'd be part of that unit. The word stable housing felt unreal. Dario explained the steps: screening, documentation, an eventual housing voucher if we were approved. It sounded like another long road. But it had an end that was more than a motel room. After we hung up, I told Dad about the program. They'd help with rent, I said. We'd have a real address. Close to the VA. You wouldn't be stuck in a motel forever. He stared at the carpet. What if I don't deserve it, he asked. What if they look at my record and decide they made a mistake letting me out? You served, I said. You got hurt. You were left alone. That's not a reason to deny you help. That's a reason you should have had it years ago. He didn't answer. But he didn't say no, either. The first tangible win wasn't big. It was a piece of paper. Naomi helped me request my school records. A week later, a fat envelope arrived at the motel office. I opened it on the desk. There it was in clinical language: adjustment disorder with prolonged grief. Age 6 to 16. Dozens of sessions. Notes about nightmares, trouble concentrating, crying spells. Every page named my father's supposed death as the cause. Every session had been billed under that story. This shows duration, Naomi said when I brought the copies to her office. Not one impulsive deception. A sustained pattern that shaped how you were treated, how resources were used, and how you saw yourself. She made extra copies and added them to a growing file. Lewis, meanwhile, went to see my mother and Travis. He called after the visit. They were polite, he said. They showed me a power of attorney document authorizing your mother to handle your father's finances. On its face, it looks valid. But I've requested copies of the original and I'll be forwarding them to legal aid and the bank for review. He paused. They insist they acted out of fear and necessity, he added. That they believed your father incapable of managing his affairs and that you were too young to understand. Did they mention faking his death? I asked. They described it as a memorial to get closure, he said. They chose their words carefully. The documents will matter more than their explanations. Days blurred together, more calls, more forms. Felicia from the bank asked me to come in. She laid out years of account activity, deposits from the VA, transfers to a joint account, withdrawals that didn't match anything I'd ever been told about. You never had direct access, she asked. No, I said. Mom said it was safer that way. She called it a college fund. Felicia highlighted the final transfer, the one that drained everything the morning after I found Dad. If someone were trying to empty accounts before scrutiny, she said, this is exactly what it would look like. She told me the bank was escalating my case to an internal fraud review committee. In the meantime, they opened a new student account in my name only. No joint access. She promised nothing she did would link back to my mother. Walking out of the branch with a debit card that only I could use felt like holding proof that I was capable of managing something, no matter what I'd been told growing up. The motel, however, reminded me daily of how precarious everything still was. One afternoon, I glanced out the window and saw a truck I recognized parked 3 spots away. Travis. No one got out. He just sat there, engine off, staring at our door. My whole body went cold. I stepped back from the window, pulled the curtain closed, and called 911. I gave them our room number, his license plate, and the fact that an APS case and a fraud investigation were already open. While I waited for the police, I threw what little we had back into bags. Dad's eyes followed my movements, confused. Travis is outside, I said. The police are on their way. His face went pale. Here? Yes. 2 officers arrived within minutes. As soon as they pulled into the lot, Travis started his engine and rolled away slowly, like he had all the time in the world. They took a report. I showed them the texts, the APS contact, the bank case number, Detective Heinz's card. One of the officers wrote it all down, then looked me in the eyes. If he comes back, call immediately, he said. We can't prevent him from driving on a public street, but he has no reason to be watching your room. That night, I slept with one ear open, listening for footsteps in the corridor. Naomi didn't waste time. She filed for a temporary restraining order against Travis based on the motel incident and the pattern of harassment. She explained what to expect, a short hearing, the judge deciding if there was enough evidence to justify a protective order. This will not solve everything, she said. But it creates consequences if he shows up again. Right now he acts like nothing can touch him. We're changing that. In the middle of all of this, Ms. Porter refused to let me forget one thing. I was not just a caretaker and a witness, I was also a person whose mind had been dragged through 12 years of manufactured grief. She referred me to a therapist at a community clinic, Dr. Kara Fulton. The clinic was in an old house with mismatched chairs and a faint smell of lavender. Dar. Fulton had a notepad she barely used and a way of sitting that made the room feel less like an office and more like a place you could say things out loud and they wouldn't break the ceiling. What brings you here? She asked. I started with the easy part. My parents kicked me out on my 18th birthday. By the time I got to, my father is alive and has been in a VA ward for 12 years, my voice was unsteady. By the time I said, they used his benefits and faked his death, my hands were shaking. She didn't tell me to calm down. She didn't tell me it sounded unbelievable. She just said, that is a lot for one person to hold, and asked how I was sleeping. Badly, I admitted. But I don't have time to fall apart. There are forms. Calls. Court. Dad. You're allowed to feel things while you do hard things, she said. It doesn't have to be one or the other. 50 minutes later, I walked out feeling the exact same problems pressing on me. The difference was that for that 1 hour, the weight had been seen by someone who wasn't trying to use it against me. Dario called about HUD VSH screening. He set an appointment at the VA clinic to evaluate Dad's eligibility, service record, current housing situation, mental health needs. The night before, I sat with Dad at the motel table and went over potential questions. They'll ask where you've been living, I said. You tell them the truth, Ridgeview, then here. They'll ask about finances. You say you trusted Mom and Travis. That you didn't see statements. What if they think I'm irresponsible, he asked. You trusted people you loved, I said. That is not irresponsibility. That is what they took advantage of. We rehearsed until he could say the basics without his voice shaking too much. Some days it felt like all we did was prepare for tests other people had designed. APS interviewed me again. Detective Heinz followed up on documents. Felicia called to clarify bank details. Naomi emailed with court dates. Dario left voicemails about forms. Everything required retelling the story in slightly different words. I started keeping a small notebook in my pocket with dates, names, case numbers. It was easier than trusting my memory, which still tripped over old narratives. In quiet moments, doubt crept in. What if this all stalled? What if agencies lost interest? What if my mother had been right my whole life, and I was too weak to manage anything without her? On those days, I would look across the room at my father, a man who had survived war, institutionalization, and betrayal, now sitting on a motel bed carefully arranging his new ID paperwork. He had believed the worst about himself because people in authority told him it was true. I knew what that felt like. And if there was one thing I could not accept anymore, it was letting their version of us be the final one recorded. We were still in a motel. Still poor. Still frightened. But we had a file now, APS case. Police report. Legal aid folder. Bank investigation. VA review. School records. Funeral records. Every document narrowed the space where my parents' lies could live. We were not safe. Yet. But for the first time, the danger wasn't one-sided. They were no longer the only ones who could knock on a door and change someone's life. We could knock, too. The first court date came faster than I expected and slower than I needed. Naomi met us in the courthouse lobby, a file under her arm. The building smelled like paper and old air conditioning. Dad's leg bounced while we waited for our case to be called. This is just the restraining order hearing, Naomi reminded us. Today is about safety, not the full history. We keep it focused. The bailiff called my name. We walked into a small courtroom. Travis was already there, in a wrinkled shirt, sitting beside a lawyer I hadn't seen before. He didn't look at me, but his jaw was set in that familiar way that used to mean danger was coming. The judge, a woman with silver hair and a serious expression, glanced between us. Naomi went first. She laid out the sequence: forced eviction on my birthday, the confrontation on the porch, the motel, Travis parked outside our room watching the door. She handed over the police report and a printout of the APSK summary. Travis's lawyer argued that he had only been concerned about family and that his presence at the motel was misinterpreted. The judge turned to him. "Do you have any legitimate reason to be sitting in a motel parking lot outside a room rented by someone you had just evicted?" she asked. Travis opened his mouth, then closed it again. "I was checking on him," he managed. "He's unstable." I was worried. "You checked on him by sitting in your truck and staring at his door," the judge said. Her tone made it clear what she thought of that explanation. She looked down at the report once more. "I find sufficient evidence of harassment and intimidation," she said. "A temporary protective order is granted. Mr. Carver, you are to remain at least 500 feet away from Mr. Gray and his father for the next 6 months. Any violation will be taken seriously." Her gavel tapped once. That was it. In movies, justice comes with stirring speeches. In real life, it came in the form of a simple distance measured in feet, and the knowledge that if he crossed it, there would be consequences beyond our fear. Outside the courtroom, Dad exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for days. "Does this mean we're safe?" he asked. "It means he can't come near us without risking arrest," Naomi said. "It's not a shield against everything. But it's a start." The next step was the VA's representative payee review. At the Ridgeview outpatient building, a social worker I hadn't met before took Dad into a small office alone. I sat in the waiting area with my hands clasped so tightly they hurt. 40 minutes later, she called me in. "Your father was very clear," she said. "He wants you to manage his benefits. We'll need you to complete some training modules and paperwork, but his stated preference carries significant weight." She handed me a folder of forms. Responsibilities. Reporting requirements. Training links. "Once this change is finalized," she said, "his payments will no longer go to his previous payee. They'll go to an account you control. Until then, we've placed a hold to prevent further withdrawals." I nodded, afraid to trust how much relief that gave me. On the bus back to the motel, Dad stared out the window. "They're giving you a lot to carry," he said. "Someone should have been carrying it for you the whole time," I said. "You just didn't get the right person until now." He was quiet for a long moment. "Thank you," he said finally. It sounded like something he had been saving for years. HUD VSH screening happened 2 days later. Dario met us at the VA clinic with a clipboard and a calm, steady presence. He went through the requirements: proof of service, homelessness status, mental health history. He listened while Dad described Ridgeview, the years lost, the motel. He didn't flinch at the mention of forged documents or stolen money. He just checked boxes, asked clarifying questions, and kept moving forward. After the interview, he walked us to the lobby. "I can't make promises," he said. "But based on what I've heard and the documentation we already have, I'm optimistic. I'll call you once the review is complete." Optimistic. It was a carefully chosen word, but it landed like a small light in a long hallway. In the meantime, we needed a more stable identity on paper. Naomi insisted we get Dad a proper state ID as soon as possible. So we went to the DMV with his discharge papers, social security card, and the new VA PO box address Dario helped us secure. We sat in plastic chairs as numbers flashed on a screen. When they called Dad's, he shuffled to the counter and answered the clerk's questions quietly. 20 minutes later, they handed him a temporary paper ID with his photo. He stared at it, thumb tracing his own name. For the first time in 12 years, an official document listed an address that was neither a hospital nor my mother's house. "Feels strange," he said softly. "Feels right," I answered. A few days later, 2 important calls came on the same afternoon. First, Lewis from APS. "We've completed a preliminary review," he said. "We found enough evidence to substantiate concerns of financial exploitation. That means we're not treating this as a misunderstanding. It's documented as abuse. Our investigation continues, but this finding will support any criminal or civil actions." I sank onto the motel bed. Hearing it put that way, that what happened had a name, that it wasn't just family conflict, made something settle inside me. An hour later, Felicia from the bank called. "Our analysts reviewed the power of attorney document your parents provided," she said. "The signature does not match your father's other verified signatures on file. The notary stamp also appears inconsistent with the notary's commission records." "Inconsistent," I repeated. Carefully chosen words again. "What does that mean for us?" "It means we are treating it as potentially fraudulent," she said. "We have frozen the related accounts to prevent movement of funds while we complete our investigation. We are also issuing a provisional credit to your student account to cover basic living expenses." She read out the amount. It was not everything that had been taken. But it was the first money anyone had given back. "Thank you," I said. The words felt too small for what it meant to have even a portion of my future restored by someone who believed the facts. Naomi called the next day to go over a new development. "Given APS's preliminary finding and the bank's internal review," she said, "we're in a strong position. I want to send formal, preservation of evidence, letters to your mother and Travis, instructing them not to destroy any financial records related to your father's benefits or your accounts." "Will they listen?" I asked. "Whether they listen or not," she said, "the letters exist. If they destroy anything after receiving them, it counts against them later." She also brought up something I hadn't considered. "APS is recommending DNA testing," she said. "Not because anyone doubts you're your father's son, but because having scientific proof shuts down any argument about your standing in these matters." "It feels invasive," I admitted. "It is," she said. "But it may protect you. People who manipulate systems often try to undermine the people calling them out. This removes one more angle they might try." We went through with the test. A technician swabbed the inside of my cheek and Dad's, labeled the samples, and sent them off. It took 10 minutes to confirm what we'd always known. The motel room became an odd mix of crisis center and waiting room. On one side of the desk, a messy stack of forms, notes, reference numbers. On the other, a growing file of official letters, reports, and confirmations. To keep from falling apart under it all, I started building a routine for both of us. Morning, medications, a basic breakfast, a short walk around the parking lot. Midday, calls and paperwork. Afternoon, any appointments. Evening, simple dinner, a few minutes of television that didn't involve war or crime, then sleep if we could manage it. It wasn't exciting. But it was predictable. For two people whose lives had been controlled by others for so long, that mattered. One afternoon, Ms. Porter called to check in. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "I'm tired," I said. "But things are moving." "Moving is good," she replied. "Remember, you're allowed to have more than one feeling at once. You can be grateful and exhausted. Relieved and angry. None of that cancels the other out." A few days later, Dario called back about HUD VSH. "You're approved," he said. "Your father qualifies for a voucher. We can start looking for units that meet program standards. 1 bedroom to start, since it'll be both of you." Approved. The word felt unreal. Dario connected me with a housing specialist named Keegan. He emailed me a list of apartments that worked with the voucher program and were near bus routes and the VA clinic. They weren't fancy. But they were real apartments. Kitchens. Bathrooms. Doors that led to hallways instead of parking lot railings. "We'll go see this one," I told Dad, pointing to a listing in a modest, safe neighborhood. 2nd floor unit. Small living room. Rent mostly covered by the voucher. He looked at the photo on my phone for a long moment. "Do you think they'll really let us stay there?" he asked. "We'll sign a lease," I said. "Our names. Not theirs. If we pay our part, we stay." He nodded, but his eyes held a wary hope I recognized in myself. In the middle of all that, Naomi called with a suggestion. "I'd like to propose a settlement conference before we file a full civil lawsuit," she said. "We have leverage now, APS's preliminary finding, the bank's internal review, the funeral records, school records. They may be willing to agree to restitution in order to avoid drawn-out litigation." "I don't trust them," I said. "I don't either," she replied. "But a structured agreement for repayment, backed by the court, is still a win. And if they stall or refuse, we still have the option to sue." This is about strategy, not forgiveness. I agreed. We scheduled the conference for a few weeks out. Meanwhile, I had to think about something I had barely let myself consider, my own future beyond this. A mess. Porter had pushed gently every time we spoke. You're allowed to have a life, she said. Not just responsibilities. So one morning, I took the bus to the community college. The student services building was full of nervous energy, people in hoodies, backpacks, staff with clipboards. I found the office of an advisor named Jenna Carlisle, whose name Ms. Porter had given me. She listened as I explained everything in condensed form, 18, newly responsible for my father's care, low income, unstable housing that was about to become stable. I don't know if I can handle classes on top of all this, I admitted. But I also don't want to lose more years. We can build around your reality, she said. Not pretend it isn't there. She pulled up a course catalog and suggested 2 online classes to start, one writing, one basic psychology. Both with flexible deadlines. We'll apply for a fee waiver, she said, opening another screen. Given your situation, you're likely to qualify. You'll also want to register with Disability Services as a caregiver. They can help advocate for flexibility if your father has a crisis. We filled out forms together. When I left her office, I had a tentative class schedule printed in my hand. It wasn't a degree. It wasn't a graduation. It was a step. The DNA results came back the same week. 99.9% probability that Dean Gray was my biological father. Lewis filed it with the APS record. Naomi added it to her folder. It didn't surprise me. But it closed one more door my mother might have tried to open if she felt cornered. Naomi also received copies of the alleged power of attorney document through formal discovery channels. She spread it out on her desk while Dad and I sat opposite her. To be clear, she said, I'm not a handwriting expert. But I can see problems. She pointed to the signature line. Your actual signature from the VA forms is consistent, she told Dad. This one is shaky, distorted, like someone was trying to imitate your name, not writing it naturally. She noted the date, shortly after he was first admitted to Ridgeview, and the notary seal, which looked faded and misaligned. If this was forged, she said, it's not just unethical. It's illegal. We may not need a paid expert if the bank and APS both raise concerns. Their internal findings already carry weight. Every new document deepened the story, not a one-time desperate act, but a deliberate pattern, built piece by piece. While the legal and bureaucratic machines moved, I tried to build something resembling daily life with Dad. We cooked simple meals in a shared microwave kitchen downstairs, careful not to crowd the space when other guests needed it. We walked laps in the parking lot for exercise. We practiced grounding techniques Dr. Fulton had taught me for when his PTSD flared or my anxiety did. Some days, we both reverted to old habits, him apologizing for everything, me apologizing for being overwhelmed. We caught ourselves more often now. One evening, after a long day of calls and paperwork, Dad sat on the bed, staring at the wall. I keep thinking about you at 6, he said quietly. Standing by an empty casket, crying over a father who was down the road, breathing. I can't stop seeing it. It wasn't your choice, I said. You were in a locked ward. They told you I didn't want to come. I believed them, he whispered. That's the part that keeps me up. I believed the people who wanted me silent more than I believed that you might still need me. You were injured, I said. You were surrounded by people in uniforms telling you what was real. I was surrounded by people with my last name doing the same thing. We both trusted the wrong ones. That's what they used. That's what we're undoing now. He swallowed hard. Do you ever wish you'd never found me? He asked. That you could have just gone to college and left all this behind? The question hurt more than I expected. I wish you hadn't been hurt, I said. I wish they hadn't lied. I wish we had those 12 years. But I don't wish I'd stayed in their version of the world. Finding you didn't ruin my life. It made the truth visible. That's painful. And it's necessary. He nodded slowly. You sound older than 18, he said. I had to be, I replied. You didn't get to be. Now it's my turn to carry the paperwork so you can finally heal. A week later, Keegan took us to see an apartment. It was on the 2nd floor of a plain brick building. The stairwell smelled like paint and dust. Inside, the unit was small but clean, a living room, a kitchenette, a bathroom with real water pressure, a bedroom with a window looking over a small patch of grass and a tree that managed to grow in a concrete courtyard. The voucher will cover most of the rent, Keegan explained. You'll pay a small portion based on your father's income. Utilities are manageable. The bus stop is 2 blocks away. The VA clinic is a short ride. Dad walked slowly through each room, touching the door frames, as if he needed to make sure they were solid. "Do you want this one?" I asked. He looked at me. "Do you?" "Yes," I said. No hesitation. We signed the forms. Move in 2 weeks, pending final processing. When we left, Dad glanced back at the building twice. "Feels like it might disappear," he said. "It won't," I answered. "We have a lease. We have paperwork. Their names aren't on any of it." Back at the motel, Naomi called with one more update. "Your mother's attorney has agreed to a settlement conference date," she said. "They've seen enough to know this isn't going away. We'll push for a structured restitution plan, plus conditions that keep your father financially out of their reach." "Will they actually agree?" I asked. "I don't expect remorse," she said. "I expect calculation. If they decide paying back what can be documented is better than facing full litigation and possible criminal charges, they'll comply. That is its own form of accountability, even if their motives aren't pure." The idea that justice might look like monthly deposits instead of dramatic punishment felt strange. But money was how they had hurt us. Taking that power away, and turning it back toward the life they'd starved, felt exactly right. We packed our bags again, this time not because we were afraid of being chased out, but because we were getting ready to move towards something that belonged to us. It was not a victory parade. It was a small procession, 2 people, 2 bags each, a file folder full of evidence, and a key we didn't have yet but had been promised. For the first time, I believed we might actually arrive somewhere our past couldn't unlock the door. Move-in day came on a gray Saturday. Keegan met us at the new building with a clipboard and 2 keys on a ring. The stairwell smelled like paint and dust. The apartment was exactly as we'd left it during the viewing, empty, quiet, waiting. We carried our things up in mismatched bags and a cardboard box that used to hold canned soup. It didn't take long. We didn't own much. When the door clicked shut behind us, Dad stood in the center of the living room and turned slowly in a circle. "No monitors," he murmured. "No staff at the door. No one telling me when the lights go out. Just us," I said. "And rent. And chores." He gave a faint smile. "I think I can handle chores." We unpacked methodically. Clothes in the small bedroom closet. Dishes, donated by the shelter, in the cupboard. Medications lined up on one shelf, away from the stove. The funeral home letter, the bank documents, and the APS correspondence went into a single folder in the top kitchen cabinet. A thin file that contained the worst and best of the last months. That evening, we ate simple pasta at the second-hand table, the window open to let in early spring air. Cars passed below. Somewhere, a radio played too loudly. It sounded like normal life. For a few minutes, we just listened. The settlement conference was scheduled for the following week. Naomi met us in a small conference room at Legal Aid. One long table, flickering fluorescent lights, a pitcher of water. My mother arrived first with her attorney. Her eyes were already red. Whether from real crying or preparation, I couldn't tell. She reached across the table as if to touch my hand. I kept mine in my lap. Travis came in 10 minutes late, alone, shoulders squared like he was heading into a minor inconvenience, not a negotiation about years of stolen money. Naomi began by laying out the facts, one by one. Dad's verified status as alive and disabled. 12 years of VA benefits paid under a representative payee arrangement. Bank records showing transfers from an account funded by those benefits into my mother and Travis's joint account. The closure of my college savings account, timed exactly with the day we found Dad. Funeral home records proving there had been no burial. School records documenting a decade of grief therapy based on a false death. APS's preliminary finding of financial exploitation. Each point was backed by a document. She slid copies across the table. Mom's attorney took notes. Travis's expression shifted from irritation to discomfort. When Naomi paused, my mother's lawyer cleared his throat. "My clients acknowledge there has been confusion and poor communication," he said carefully. "They are willing to discuss a restitution plan to avoid further litigation." "Confusion," Naomi repeated. "Your clients held a memorial service for a living man, collected his benefits, drained his son's savings, and staged a funeral around an empty casket. That is not confusion." Silence settled over the table. The conversation that followed was not cinematic. It was numbers. Naomi had totaled the documented combat pay transfers into accounts controlled by my mother and Travis, taking into account basic living expenses that could reasonably have been attributed to Dad's care in the early years. The number left over, money with no plausible connection to his support, was substantial. Mom's attorney proposed a smaller figure and a vague schedule. Naomi rejected it. They went back and forth. Finally, they settled on a plan. A specific sum, tied to documented transfers, to be repaid in installments over several years. Payments to be deposited into a restricted restitution account overseen by legal aid and the bank, not directly into mine. Any missed payments triggering immediate legal consequences, including revival of full civil claims. You understand, Naomi said, turning to my mother and Travis, that this agreement does not erase the APS finding, the bank investigation, or the possibility of criminal charges. It merely addresses the civil restitution side. My mother dabbed her eyes with a tissue. We never meant to hurt anyone, she said softly. We were scared. We thought. This is not the place for emotional narratives, Naomi said, her tone still calm. This is the place for signatures. They signed. I signed. The attorney collected copies. We walked out of the room without hugging, without promises of future reconciliation. The agreement was not forgiveness. It was an acknowledgement on paper that what they took was not theirs. 2 days later, Naomi and I were back in court for the asset freeze hearing. The same judge listened as Naomi explained that accounts tied to Dad's benefits and my savings needed to remain frozen while APS, the bank, and law enforcement finished their work. Mom's attorney argued that the freeze created hardship. The hardship, Naomi replied, belongs to the disabled veteran and his son, who have been homeless while their funds paid someone else's bills. The judge granted a limited freeze on disputed accounts. The order prevented Mom and Travis from moving or hiding money that might eventually be used to repay what they owed. Another small, precise victory. In the middle of all this, the VA sent a thick envelope. Inside was an official letter confirming the representative payee change. Effective immediately, I was authorized to manage Dad's benefits. The previous payee, my mother, was removed. The letter listed responsibilities: paying for housing, food, medical care, keeping records, reporting annually to the VA. I read it 3 times. The weight of it settled over my shoulders. It wasn't light, but it fit. I carried it into the living room where Dad was watching a documentary about cooking. It's done, I said, handing him the pages. From now on, your checks come to an account I control. Not her. He read the first paragraph slowly. His hands trembled, but his grip on the paper was firm. They trust you, he said. They should have trusted you, I answered. This is the next best thing. The first caregiver stipend hit my account on the 15th of the month. The description line read, VA Caregiver Support Payment. Combined with Dad's benefits, which now went into an account only I could access, we had enough to cover our part of the rent, food, and basic expenses without leaning on temporary vouchers. I showed Dad the balance. This is what taking care of you is worth, according to the VA, I said. He shook his head. You can't put a number on that. You're right, I said. But it helps pay the electric bill. We celebrated by buying fresh vegetables and real coffee, not the instant packets from the motel lobby. It felt small and enormous at the same time. Then, because he could not stay away from trouble even with a restraining order, Travis tried one more time. I saw his truck first, from the kitchen window. Parked at the far end of our apartment lot, angled toward our building, engine off. This time, there was no hesitation. I stepped away from the window, called 911, and told the dispatcher there was an active protective order in place. Gave the case number. Gave his license plate. The police arrived quickly. I watched from behind the curtain as they approached his truck. After a brief conversation, they asked him to step out, handcuffed him, and walked him to the patrol car. At the violation hearing, the prosecutor laid out the restraining order, the motel incident, the apartment visit. The judge listened, then extended the order to a full year and warned Travis that any further violation would result in jail time pending trial. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something in his expression that looked like genuine fear. Consequence had finally become real. Around the same time, Lewis called with APS's final report. We've concluded our investigation, he said. We found sustained financial exploitation of a disabled adult, misrepresentation to agencies, and misuse of benefits. Our report has been forwarded to the district attorney's office for criminal review. Does that mean they'll be charged? I asked. That decision is up to the DA, he said. But our documentation supports it. Even if they choose not to pursue charges, the report stands. It will follow your mother and stepfather if they ever try to act as guardians or payees for anyone else. Knowing that they would not be able to repeat this pattern with another vulnerable person mattered more to me than the idea of them sitting in a cell. Felicia called soon after with the bank's final decision. Based on our investigation, she said, we've determined that the closure of your savings account and the transfers from your father's benefit account were not authorized in a way that meets our standards. We are converting your provisional credits into permanent ones. Additionally, we're contributing a small institutional restitution amount in recognition of the delay in detection. It did not replace every dollar. But it was enough to rebuild a meaningful part of what had been taken. On paper, a list of numbers. In reality, tuition for the community college classes Jenna had helped me plan. A buffer in case Dad had a bad month. Proof that a system which had been used against us could, with enough persistence, be bent toward fairness. Life did not suddenly become simple. Dad continued therapy with Dr. Ortiz. Some nights, he woke up shouting, dragged back into memories of explosions and hospital restraints. On those nights, we sat at the small kitchen table in the dark, drinking water and breathing until the images faded. I kept seeing Dr. Fulton. We talked about anger, about grief for a father I had lost in one way at 6 and found in another at 18, about the part of me that still half expected my mother to call and tell me the whole thing was a misunderstanding. I blocked her number anyway. Naomi encouraged firm boundaries. You don't owe them access to your life, she said. Accountability does not require you to provide comfort. A few extended relatives reached out after they heard fragments of the story. Some believed my mother's version, that I was being ungrateful and influenced. Some quietly admitted they had always wondered why there had never been a grave. I did not spend much energy convincing anyone. The official document spoke louder than any argument I could make. The restitution payments began arriving in the restricted account. Small, at first, but on schedule. Naomi monitored them. Every deposit was another admission, forced through legal pressure if not conscience, that what they held did not belong to them. A year after I woke up to cold water and the words, "Time to get out," my life looked completely different than I had imagined in the worst moments, and in some ways, better than I had dared to hope. Our apartment remained small, but it was ours. The rent went out of the account I managed. The lights stayed on. The fridge was rarely empty. Dad had a regular schedule, therapy sessions, group meetings at the VA, checkups. He knew his medication plan. He knew where his ID was. He knew, in a quiet, growing way, that he was not an unwanted burden. I took 2 online classes that semester, Introduction to Psychology and an English composition course. I did homework at the kitchen table while Dad watched television or read articles Dario had given him about veterans' rights. Sometimes he would ask what I was working on. I'd explain a concept, and he'd listen like it mattered. You know, he said once, none of this fixes what we lost. But I like watching you build something in front of me. It makes those years feel less like a dead space. We're filling them, I said. Not erasing. Just, building on top. On the anniversary of that first day at the shelter, I walked past Harbor Street and saw Ms. Porter coming out with a stack of folders. She recognized me immediately. You look different, she said. Taller, somehow. Or maybe just less crushed. Things are better, I said simply. Not perfect. But better. I told her the short version, the apartment, the VA decision, the bank result, the APS report, school. She listened, eyes bright. You did a lot of this, I said. If you hadn't checked that form. I did my job, she replied. You did the hard part. You kept showing up when you had every reason not to. That night, back at home, I sat at our table, Dad's evening medications in front of me, dinner in the oven, my laptop open to an assignment about narrative perspective. The apartment smelled like garlic and onions. The window was cracked to let in the cool air. A bus rumbled by outside. Dad spoke from the living room. What are you writing? An essay, I said. About truth. And who gets to tell it? He chuckled softly. Seems like you have some experience in that area. I thought back to the empty casket at 6, the staged grief, the years of therapy built on a lie. Then to the shelter, the VA ward, the motel, the courtrooms. To the long list of names, Porter, Lewis, Naomi, Felicia, Dario, Keegan, Ortiz, Fulton, Jenna, who had helped redirect the story. For so long, my mother and Travis had controlled the narrative, what had happened, who was dead, who was alive, who was trustworthy, who was not. We had not rewritten the past. We could not. But we had taken back control of the present and the future. Not with grand gestures. With records. With signatures. With boundaries. With a locked apartment door that only our keys opened. I'm writing, I said, about what it looks like when people use systems to harm, and how it feels when you start using those same systems to protect. Does it have a happy ending? Dad asked. It has an honest one, I said. We have a home. We're safe. They can't take any more. And they're finally being held to account for what they did. That seems close enough. He nodded, satisfied. We sat down to eat at our second-hand table, in our small living room, under a ceiling that belonged to no one but us and the landlord. It was not dramatic. It was not perfect. It was stable. It was honest. It was ours. And after everything that had been taken, that felt like the most complete justice we were ever going to get. It was enough. Thank you for watching the video, like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.